So you're curious in the Salesforce Administrator certification. Well, today we're going to be talking through all 7 sections of the test. I'm going to give some specific tips on what to look out for in these sections of the test. I'll also go through the best way to study to pass this on the first try and answer the tale-old question of, can I take this test without any Salesforce experience? So let's jump into it. So let's do a quick breakdown of this test. There are going to be 60 graded questions. On top of those 60 graded questions, there will be 5 ungraded questions. Salesforce uses these to kind of roll in and out of the certification exam for their own analysis to see how these different questions go. But again, only 60 graded questions, and you need a passing grade of a 65%. Now, very important that you pay attention to the different sections of the exam as they have different weights, or you will see more questions regarding these sections on the exam. So want to jump into the different sections. As I mentioned, there are 7 different sections to this exam. I want to talk through each one and give some specific tips, what to look out for, what to study for in each section. So the first section we're going to talk about is the configuration and setup, which takes 20% of the exam here. Now, a few pieces you're really going to want to be familiar with are understanding profile versus permission set. Understand when each of those are used when configuring and setting up your users. This section deals a lot with different data management, so understand different sharing models, understand object security versus field level security. You know, what are the important factors of these? Where do you set these up? And in what cases is each going to be useful? Throughout this exam, you'll receive scenarios where you'll be asked a question or a scenario, and your answers will be looking for what is the best possible solution. So again, know the differences between profiles, permission sets, when to use them, when are they helpful, understand object security versus field level security, and different sharing models. Last thing to note is understand where visibility of objects, of tabs, and of fields are determined. If you do that, you'll be pretty confident in this section. Again, these will definitely be on the test. Familiarize yourself with the entire configuration and setup piece, but these questions will absolutely be on the test. Please make sure you don't just memorize these principles of Salesforce. The test is designed to make you think through and understand the best possible question. So at the end of this video, as we go through all of the different exam prep and different guides, I'll go through the best way to study those. But this is what you'll see in the configuration and setup section of the exam. The second section here is the Object Manager and Lightning App Builder section. And that's going to take up 20% of this exam. Now, what's very important is to know that the Object Manager is every admin's best friend. That really is just such an important building block of an admin's understanding of Salesforce. So in this section, it's critical to know how you leverage and when you leverage standard objects versus maybe needing to customize with custom objects in the Object Manager. The other critical piece here that is just so important to the Salesforce architecture is you'll be tested on relationships, object relationships, such as master detail fields and lookup fields. Understand the limitations of each, when they are used on standard objects right now, and how you would be able to set those up yourself. Relationships is so important. Salesforce really is just a very souped up version of Excel. And just like Excel, you can relate and reference different tabs and different rows of Excel. That is what Salesforce is trying to teach you with these relationships. So understand relationships, how objects relate to one another natively, and how you can customize to help these objects relate through master detail relationships as well as lookup relationships. So again, those true critical pieces on the Object Manager and Lightning App Builder is understand the Object Manager, be able to navigate it well, understand standard versus custom objects, as well as those relationships. You do that and you're very familiar with those, you'll see a lot of scenarios where Salesforce is testing you so that you understand the limitations of each type of object and the limitations of those relationships. Third section here is sales and marketing applications, which takes up 12% of the exam. Now this is really where you got to understand the user's perspective. And as I say that, I say sales and marketing users. Understand how leads work into Salesforce, how leads are converted and what types of records are created upon conversion, as well as moving into the opportunity object. Understand the different stages, path settings, and really how those standard objects relate. Talking about leads, accounts, contacts, opportunities. You want to get in the mindset of a sales user or marketing user and know how do they leverage Salesforce to then be able to understand how you can configure Salesforce to meet their needs and help them to manage their prospects and to manage their pipeline or their deals. So very important you understand the leads process and how leads are converted, what that process does to records in Salesforce, as well as the opportunity object. There's a lot that can happen, a lot that can be customized on those two objects alone, leads and opportunities. Understand them, understand how Salesforce uses them, and how you can configure those for end users. So again, that's the section of sales and marketing applications. The fourth section is service and support applications, which takes up 11% of the exam. Now, similar to sales and marketing, sales and marketing has dedicated objects, such as lead, opportunities, etc. On the service and support side, they have dedicated standard objects of cases. So know how cases are used, understand a few features of cases, such as auto response rules, such as escalation rules. These are critical for those that are using Salesforce in a service or support role. You're gonna want to not only test well on that, but everything you test for is to help you become a better admin, to be a valuable asset, to configure Salesforce to help service and sales reps. So cases is extremely important. Understand case management. And again, in the mindset of that end user, service or sales user, how are they using cases? What are limitations there? What are some out-of-the-box features, as I mentioned, such as auto response, such as escalation? Cases is a critical part of how Salesforce helps service and support to do their job. The fifth section is productivity and collaboration, which takes up 7% of the exam. Two quick pieces here is to understand activity management and understand the app exchange. Now, activity management is understanding how Salesforce can track activity on records. Very common, those are gonna be activities maybe coming from different marketing tools into Salesforce, saying, hey, John Doe or Jane Doe downloaded a marketing piece, here's the activity in Salesforce. As well as for sales users, Salesforce is able to track or log phone calls or emails. So understand how Salesforce tracks activity in Salesforce. Where is it shown? How can you customize the view or what can be tracked? This is very critical for end users as well as managers to understand what are my activity metrics? What is my conversion rate? How many phone calls, how many emails does it take to convert certain records? Now, you won't be asked specifically that, but again, we want to make sure that you are studying and understanding much more than what you're gonna be tested on. If you look to study to memorize, you will not do well on the test, and even if you do pass the test, you will not do well as a professional admin. So again, activity management is so important. Understand the difference between events, difference in tasks, and how those can help users track their activity. The second piece here is the app exchange. If you're not familiar with the app exchange, it's like the Google App Store or the Apple App Store, where on your phone, you can download additional apps for functionality, for features, for games that you couldn't already have on your phone. That's exactly what the app exchange is. As you familiarize yourself with Salesforce, we already talked about understanding what Salesforce can natively do, whether it's standard objects, custom objects. What can Salesforce do out of the box? What can you then customize and build? And then, rather than building an app myself, I'm sure I can find one in the App Store. So understand good use cases. And this is going to be helpful to know the limitations of Salesforce, to then know, when is it worth building this myself or going to the App Store or the App Exchange to find that feature, to find that build. So the App Exchange in day-to-day use is so important as an admin, understanding what's on the App Exchange, how you can leverage that. And so that is something that you will see in this section of the exam. Now the sixth section here is data and analytics management, which is going to take up 14% of the exam. Now I'll break this down into data, and then I'll break this down into analytics. On the data side, you will definitely see questions and scenarios revolving import and export settings of Salesforce. For example, be familiar with the different import tools that are available to you and the limitations, what they're commonly used for and what they are not able to do. And so the import functions, very important to have a little bit of vocab, familiar with what's an insert, an update, or an upsert. Know what those mean. Data is such an important part of Salesforce. On a day-to-day basis as an admin or a consultant, not only am I working in Salesforce, but I'm also working in data. I'm often having to import or export data to Excel or to Salesforce or vice versa. And so know the tools that are used, understand the different features of those tools. Now on the other side of this section is the analytics, which is how you view and visualize the data once it's in Salesforce. So two big pieces here are the reports and dashboards. But on the analytics piece, you're going to want to understand sharing settings, understand how report folders can be shared, what types of individuals can view or edit, groups, roles, users, how you can share those reports and the report folders, as well as dashboards. Understand when dashboards are used, what type of visualization charts are helpful on analytics. This is something that you will see scenarios on. Make sure you understand, make sure that you test and look to actually build a series of reports, series of dashboards as you study for the certification in this case. And the seventh and final section here is workflow and process automation, which takes up 16% of the exam. Now, important to note here that there are a lot of different automation tools. Now, whether you have been in Salesforce for a while and are looking to just get this certification out of the way, or maybe you're brand new to Salesforce, maybe you've never even seen Salesforce, the one word that you're going to want to know when it comes to process and automations is flows. Flows is Salesforce's best automation tool, declarative tool, where it doesn't require any custom coding. Salesforce is trying to push everything down that route. They're actually in the process right now of migrating some of the older process and automation tools, such as workflow rules, such as process builders. They're trying to push all of those onto flows. So please get familiar with flows and make sure you do understand the limitations of workflow rules, process builders. What types of actions can they take, right? Which ones can send emails? Which ones can invoke a process? Make sure you understand the limitations of the different process and automation tools. But at the end of the day, flows, that's always the best tool. So kind of a tip when you come across a question on the exam and it lists several of those, flows is always the one that Salesforce is trying to push everyone to. It's an incredible tool. I highly recommend that you look on Trailhead, some super badges, get familiar with flows. As an admin, it will be your right-hand man in all automation questions. The other piece here to know is understand a little bit about approval processes, when to use them, how to set up approval processes, whether you are looking at delegated approvers or how that works, multi-step approval processes, something that you're going to want to know on the exam. There will be scenarios that come up that have questions. And so approval processes and the automation tools, know the limitations there, and you'll do great in this section of the exam. So before we jump into the best materials, if you found this information helpful, please like and subscribe. I'm constantly putting out content like this to help share my experience and help learn from the community on how to better ourselves in this career path. So with that, let's jump back into it. Let's talk about the best materials that you are able to leverage to study and pass the Salesforce Administrator Certification exam. First off is going to be the actual Trailhead guide itself, or the exam guide. This is going to be critical for you to familiarize yourself with, understand the structure of the test, understand how to sign up for the test if this is your first one, and the 7 sections that I've covered previously in this video. I'll have a few bullet points on each, but this is important just to have that in place as a foundation of what to expect on the test. Now, second is within the exam guide itself, it will link to a few other resources, to free resources. Number one is going to be Trailhead Trail Mixes, which is a series of modules where you can actually get some hands-on experience to read through, take short quizzes, as well as have different test environments or developer orgs where you can actually go in yourself and experiment and build right there in a Salesforce environment the different principles that you're learning. So the trail mix is critical. There's several trail mixes already put out by Salesforce themselves, as well as just other users, other admins that found this helpful. And the trail mix is just a series of those modules, a series of those principles that you can learn. Gamifies a little bit the learning process, which is great. So trail mixes will be phenomenal for you on Trailhead. And the other piece that's already a part of Trailhead are super badges. Super badges are fun because they are hands-on experience. They give you scenarios, they give you situations where you need to go into a Salesforce developer org or sandbox and actually build and test your build according to what the super badge is looking to accomplish. There's actually an admin super badge set that I'll link in the description that I highly recommend that you walk through and that you take your time to understand what you're building. Now, I mentioned that Trailhead's great at gamifying, but as in all games, there's people who look for shortcuts. I promise you that if you look for shortcuts, if you look for people to give you answers on Trailhead or super badges, it will not benefit you. It will just give you extra points, extra badges, but you need to learn it yourself. And so please don't search for those answers elsewhere. Look to find those answers and build those answers yourself for the super badges. So super badges are a great resource. It's free. You can get a Trailhead account at any time for free, and a great way to get that hands-on experience. Now, the last 2 resources I'll add, they aren't free, but they're phenomenal resources. The first one is on Udemy. There's a course by Mike Wheeler, who is really well known within the Salesforce community. It's Mike Wheeler's Salesforce Administrator Certification Guide course. It's what I purchased myself a while back and was able to use that. He goes through several videos and practice tests, practice examples to walk you through everything to expect on the exam. It is extremely thorough and extremely helpful to prepare for the exam. And this is particularly if you're coming with no experience to Salesforce. If you have never even seen it, you're just interested, you think it's a good career pivot, I highly recommend his Udemy course. It's phenomenal. Now, the last material that I highly recommend is Focus on Force. This is a website where there are several guides to all sorts of Salesforce certifications, but I highly recommend the Focus on Force practice tests. I purchased these for every certification that I've gotten, and I even have some that I want to take. The practice tests are phenomenal. They are very similar to the questions that will be on the actual exams themselves. These practice tests are phenomenal because after each question or after each exam, you can go through and see what questions you got wrong, and they actually give explanations and examples as to why your answer was right or wrong. So again, it's all about understanding the solution, not just memorizing, but understanding the principle that's being taught and whatever feature or component of Salesforce that you should be familiar with. So I highly recommend the Focus on Force practice tests. There's one for the Salesforce certification guide, and there's hundreds of questions within those practice tests. So recommend you look into those as well. So that rounds out the materials that I recommend in helping you prepare to pass the certification exam. So to close this out, I do want to address one last question that I see all over the Salesforce community and I've been asked myself is, can I get this certification if I have no experience? And my first question is, what do you mean by experience? For example, I passed the certification without any paid experience. I wasn't paid as an admin, I wasn't configuring things for a company, but I had experience because I was building in a developer org through Trailhead. I was building and learning within a Salesforce environment. And so experience is absolutely necessary to pass this exam. As I said, if you just try to memorize and do it as if you're memorizing answers to questions on a test, this will be very difficult because the exam is highly weighted on scenarios, understanding scenarios, interpreting them, and knowing the best possible answer. So you have to have experience, but that doesn't mean that you have to be paid as an admin to gain experience. You can get free experience out there by building within these developer orgs, experiencing and being able to see these solutions in place. As they say, there's three types of learners. There's visual, audio, and kinesthetic. By building in a sandbox, you're able to see and experience for yourself to be able to suffice some of the types of learnings that maybe is best for you. So highly recommend that you go get experience yourself. Don't have to be paid for it, but I recommend that you get it in order to understand these principles to pass the test. So I hope this has been helpful. Let me know if you have any other questions. I'm happy to address any personally, and best of luck on the exam, and come on back if you pass. I'd love to know how it went for you. Thanks, bye.